na da na da ni sa re ga ma ga ma re ga re ga ma re ga re sa ga ma dha pa pa ga ma da ni da pa di ga ma dha ni da na 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 narde ban ladli ghar gaavo ban ladli ghar gaavo mairi aaj badhava ban ladli ghar gaavo mairi aaj badhava ban ladli बन के मिल प्यार रचाओ उबटन में जी तेल चढ़ाओ अच्छे बन के गाओ रिझाओ बजाओ मायरी आज बधावा बन लाडली गर गाओ जा सुखा करणे देव वेडावला जा सुखा करणे देव वेडावला वैकुंठी सोडूनी संत सदनी राहिला जा सुखा करणे देव वेडावला श्री सत्य नारायणम् उपास्महे नित्यं सत्यज्ञानानन्दमयं सर्वं विष्णुमयं श्री सत्यानारायणम् उपास्महे नित्यं सत्यज्ञानानन्दमयं सर्वं विष्णुमयं श्री वासवादि पूजितं वर मुनिगण भावितं दास जन परिपालितं वासमान बदरी स्थितं श्री सत्य नारायणम् उपास्महे नित्यं सत्यज्ञानानन्दमयं सर्वं विष्णुमयं श्री नमस्कारम ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः. We are exploring and trying to perceive the great amount of musical thought, the genius of composition, the assimilation of so many cultural, musical and spiritual values in Muttuswami Dikshitar's compositions. For a mind as vast and as expansive as Muttuswami Dikshitar's would not be but touched deeply by anything that is beautiful. Muttuswami Dikshitar traveled a lot. We know that. he traveled the length and breadth of the country. In fact, he is also said to have spent 4 to 5 years with his guru, Chidambaranatha Yogin, at Varanasi. Imagine 250 years back, when the predominant music at Varanasi would have been that of the Drupad tradition. Varanasi is a seat of music. Some of the greatest gharanas in both Khayal and Drupad have emanated from Varanasi. So just to visualize Dikshitar sitting on the banks of the Ganga, sounds of Drupad wafting from the windows of great masters of that time, how it would have moved and inspired Dikshitar. He is, of course, very, very well grounded in the Carnatic idiom, the structures of the Kriti, the Ragas, the theoretical aspects, everything, thanks to the great lineage that he comes from, right? And that of his father, Ramaswami Dikshitar, who has groomed him and trained him very, very thoroughly in the South Indian traditions. But then Dikshitar, the composer, feels compelled and feels moved by the beauty of the North Indian tradition, especially the Drupad. The impact of some of those one starts feeling in his compositions. Even a lot of the flavors, like what I sang now, is a raga called Miyaki Todi, which is an old raga. And of course, I also sang a couple of lines of the composition Sri satyanArAyaNam Upasmahe of Muttuswami Dikshitar. And you can see in terms of the gait of the composition, the solid sonority of Drupad reflected in the attitude of the composition, not just the way it is sung, but also in terms of the murchanas, what we call in Hindustani the pakad or chalan of the raga. The long notes, the means or the curves, slow glissandos. Shri Satya. It's all Swarakshara also. Sri Satya. Right? Sadapa. That mean that Ullasita, or what we call Jaru. That gamaka is actually called Ullasita in our theory. And some of the murchanas that we generally see in the Kriti, we gain idea of the murchanas from the compositions. They are not written down anywhere. Okay? So when we say a Shankarahabharana moves like this, a Bhairavi, this is the very signature murchana, it is because we see that in the beautiful compositions and then we imbibe it. Similarly here too, Shiva pantuvarALi or Shubha pantuvarALi as it is known, you see the movements of Sadapa, Madapa, Mariga. These are the exact same murchanas and chalan of the Miyaki Todi that I sang. Sada, Nidapa, Pabaga. The Nyasa, the Jivaswara of the Gandhara, has a resting place. Then Daba is not Padha, it's not Krama like in the Aroha Avroha of the Raga, but the Chalan. Daba Mada. Upasmahe also is Swarakshara. Upasmahe. The movement of the Kriti itself is, it's always Gapamadha, which is the Chalan of Miyaki Todi. In the Macha Kurma Varahadi, right? Gari Gapamada Baba. It's not Riga Mapada Pamaga. It's not that. Gari Gapamada Mada Sada Dasa. Again Swarakshara. Dhasa movement. It's not Dhanisa. Dasa Jana. That Nyasa and Gandhara again in the higher octave. In the Abhang that I sang, the power of the upper portion of the Uttaranga of the Raga. Okay, so Miyaki Todi is a morning Raga, which is Uttaranga Pradhan. So that's why Jasukha Karane Deva Vedavala Jasukha Karane Deva. So Damada, the Panchama being Varjya and so many of the Murchanas. All that I see reflected in Muttuswami Dikshitar's composition, Sri satyanArAyaNam. So it is not a coincidence. It is just that something is so beautifully moved Dikshitar and he decides to make it his own. There are no geographical boundaries of north, south, my style, your style, nothing. All that dissolves in the face of absolute beauty, beautiful music. So you see this attitude, this particular eclectic, Vistara, Vishal, Soch, the thinking of Muttuswami Dikshitar in terms of his compositions, when we will go through about 7 or 8 examples of compositions which are greatly reflecting of that influence of the North Indian tradition on Muttuswami Dikshitar. We will see in some of the ragas how that assimilation or that how he brings it into the fold of Carnatic aesthetic is so fantastic, is so magical. It is Carnatic, but then it's a new aesthetic within the Carnatic. The North Indian system, as when it makes a move into the Carnatic system, how it finds a very comfortable yet unique space for itself. The influence of the Hindustani aesthetic sometimes is not just about the swaras in a raga, it is also sometimes about the relationship between swaras within a raga. For example, in the Kriti nIrajAkshi, kAmAkshi, in the raga hindOLam, Dikshitar seeks to redefine the resonance. Generally, hindola resonates in the shadja and madhyama very beautifully. It's a perfect fourth. But madhyama and nishada is the resonance that one finds in Hindustani music a lot. So this I see in a lot of compositions, and Malkons, which is the parallel, same scale raga in Hindustani, this mani relationship is celebrated much, much more. For example, in the very beautiful composition, Jina ke man Rama Biraj. So in this, it is a Vilambit Bandish. So you say, Mani da. So throughout, in the Vistar of this raga, throughout the Bharat of this raga, Malkons resonates with that Mani da, Masani da, Masani da, Mani da, Dani. That particular aesthetic is reiterated again and again. It's almost like a trance thing. Jana ke man Rama Biraj, Biraj. In another Drut composition, also same thing. Aja more gar aila balma. So mani ni da. So when Dikshitar composes this nIrajAkshi, this need not be exactly that way, because we don't know how Malkons was sung 250 years back. Because the nIrajAkshi kAmAkshi is very different from a Tyagaraja composition, Samajavargamana. It's very different in terms of the consciousness of the relationship between swaras. So, nIrajAkshi kAmAkshi Nirada Chikure Tripure Nira. So Dikshitar himself paints the Sama, Mani, Sama, Sama, that kind of relationship. He begins on the Nishada. nIrajAkshi kAmAkshi Nirada Chikure. Throughout the composition, that Mani resonance is reiterated. Even in the very, very famous Chittaswara section of this composition, which is basically a dialogue between Madhyama and Nishada. Ni ni dama ga ga ma ma ni dama ni da ma ga ga ma ma ga sa ni da ni sa sa ga ga ma ma ni da ni sa sa ga ga sa ni sa ma ga sa ni sa ga sa ni ga sa ni da ma ga ga sa ni sa ga ma ni da ni sa ga sa ni da ma ga ga ma ma ni ra jakshi. So possibly the sound of that mani is what Dikshitar is trying to capture in his composition also. In addition to so many other beautiful things, this is one aspect of the pakad, they say in Hindustani. Pakad means to catch the raga. My guru S.R.J. sir says, Dikshitar caught the raga. nIrajAkshi kAmAkshi nirada chikure tripure nIrajAkshi kAmAkshi nirada chikure tripure. Rama Rama kaluSHa virama darabril laloma Rama Rama kaluSHa virama darabril laloma Rama Rama srimaija kamasuguna dama parandama shama Mamava Shiva Guru Guga Sutrama Vibhuta Vinuta Nama Dapa Maga Gapada Nida Dapa Maga Dapa Maga Dapa Maga Pamaga Maga Riga Dapa Maga Maga Risa Nidasa Rigapa Gadapa Ganidapa Maga Padasa Darisa Nidarisa Nidapa Maga Sanidapa Maga Riga Rama Rama kaluSHa virama darabril laloma Rama. Very beautiful composition. In the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshani, this Raga Ramakali is placed under the Mela 15, Maya Malavagauda. The word used is Malavagauda, not Maya Malavagauda. But then, Sriram Dikshitar says something which is very, very confusing. He says, though it is placed under number 15, under this Mela, it has to be sung with all Pratimadhyama. So how do you do that? Then when you visit the Hindustani Ramakali, which is also a very old raga, you find that both the Madhyamas are there. Again, everything about the Madhyanga Pradhana. Madhyanga Pradhana means the raga shines in the middle of the octave. So Ramakali gets consolidated in terms of Aroha, Avroha as Sariga Pada Sa Sanidava Magari Sa. Only the Varja principle operating here. While going it is Sariga Pada Sa, and while coming it is Sampurna. We see that also reflected very clearly in this version of Ramakali that I have learned from my guru, Dr. T. Vishwanathan. The Ramakali of Hindustani, which is also a very well sung raga today. It comes under Bhairav That, but the Pratimadhyama usage is quite prominent. Even what they call Komal Nishad, or what we call the Kaisiki Nishada, is also present. Sagama, that prayoga is there. Padama Pagamaga, Rama Nama Japale Mana और कछु नहीं आवे काम तेरो दुख भवताप निवारण मन राम नाम जपले मन राम नाम जपले मन राम नाम जपले. So the Ramakali, Rama, Rama. Actually, if you go to see, the two are kind of mirror images, but for the aesthetic of the gamakas. So I sometimes wonder if this could have been raga with two madhyamas. Even the Ramakali composition, that is just a thought that I entertain. But that Sriram Dikshitar chooses to say this is sung with Pratimadhyama, lends credibility to the prism. What I am presuming is that this is also probably an influence of the Hindustani aesthetic. We don't know how Muttuswami Dikshitar sang it. But the other thing very beautiful about this composition is the prasa of ma. The syllable ma resonates throughout the whole composition. You can just revisit and see Rama, Kali, kaluSHa, Virama, the rabhrilama, Sri Mahija Kama, Suguna Dhama, Parandhama, Shyama, Mamava, Sutrama, Vibhuta, Vinuta, Nama. So somehow the resonance of that particular syllable also adds to the glory of the composition. Though it's a very small composition, you see there is so much of musical richness in it in so many ways. In Muttuswami Dikshitar, I see a perfect example of how linguistic, poetic glory and musical glory come in a beautiful marriage, which is so fantastic, It is beyond even the meaning of the word. So how the word sounds, how the dhvani of these aksharas sound, and how they merge with the melody, the tune of the song. Rama, Rama, Kali, kaluSHa, Virama, Dara, Laloma, Rama, Rama. That's an option which is beautiful. So I had actually sung this version for my sir, saying it is nice, this is nice. And I also told that Muttuswami Dikshitar probably would be happy to listen to this. So, but he was very appreciative of the fact. But of course, I don't sing it that way because that's not how it was taught to me. But the idea that these compositions are open for interpretation, provided you do it with integrity. And that is how all the great musicians have done. I don't accept that Veena Dhanamal didn't interpret it, that Brindama didn't interpret it, or D.K. Patamal didn't interpret it. There is a lot of interpretation going on, and that is what a classical tradition is supposed to do. Things are not static. Things are not frozen in time. Things are moving, but with the core value and integrity to the composition being intact. It is not that you have to reproduce, clone how I sing is going to be different from how my guru sang. But that I can sing it in front of my guru, and my guru being happy with it, that displays some sense of integrity to the composition that he also appreciates. The tradition moves like that. The raga khamas, as depicted in the Kriti Santana Gopala Krishnam, also reflects the Hindustani aesthetic of raga khamaj. And we have to keep in mind that the very, very beautiful mind of the South Indian musician has always been very open. We see that the full-blown adaptation of raga like Kafi as Kapi, as even Brindavana Saranga by Tyagaraja, so many beautiful adaptations. In the raga Khamaj, the beautiful interplay between the two nishadas. Again, a dilemma of Vivaditvam for Muttuswami Dikshitar. We find that he's striving for a purity of scale. It is generally called a pure scale, Upanga Raga, if it doesn't have any Anya Swaras, right? He still wants to have the essence of Khamaj reflected in his Khamas composition. Khamaj is a lot in the region of Ga to Sa. Manamohana Jamarasiya, Manamohana Jamarasiya, Manamohana Jamarasiya, Manamohana Jamarasiya. Nikola ke bali jau chabi dekhati hari manamohana sham rasiya 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 manamohana sham rasiya. Of course, here there was full-blown both the nishadas. But in Muttuswami Dikshitar's composition, it is still Santana Gopala Krishnam Upasmahe. So the Sanisa, so managing to show Khamas and that Kakali Nishada in an Anuswara, it is still categorized under Hari Kedara Gauda, which is the Hari Kamboji. But then the Kakali Nishada also makes an appearance now and then as a very minor Anuswara. In the Anupallavi, Santana Saubhagya Vidarana Nipunataram, Santana Saubhagya Vidarana Nipunataram. So, Sani Sani Sada Padani Sari Sada. That Nishada is present there, and that is the beauty of it. Nartana Murali Dharam Nadaradam nIrajasana Dinutam Nila Swaraksharam Vekirar Nila Mega. So that is Kakala Nishada. Though we are singing it as Sa, Nila Mega Jitagatram Santana Gopala Krishnam Upasmahe. So you see the adaptation of the Khamaj into Khamas. He is making sure that he respects the lineage and the philosophy of Vivadi, but at the same time is able to bring out the beauty of the two Nishadas in his own way. In the Raga Dujavanti, which is known as 3-4 names, it is called Jujavanti, sometimes it's called Dvijavanti, it is called Dujavanti. Dujavanti owes its existence to a Hindustani raga called Jai Jaivanti. Jai Jai twice, so Dvijavanti becomes Dujavanti. And of course the seminal Kriti of Muttuswami Dikshitar, even though there are a couple of compositions of Ramaswamy Dikshitar and Muddu Venkata Makhi in this Dujavanti, what we have with us are two compositions. One is Akhilandeshwari and the other is Chetashree Balakrishna. Akhilandeshwari is not there in the SSP, but Chetashree is there. And so we shall see how, based on Chetashree, how we can see the mechanisms and strategies of adaptation of Jaivanti into Tujavanti. The speciality of Jaivanti is the beautiful way in which the play of the Sadharana Gandhara and the Antara Gandhara. Jada Chanda Chisa Jatajuta Ganga Abhiraji Because in Hindustani there are two nishadas also. Kanana Kundala Gala Bicha Sohat Mala Hatha Trishula Saje Mache Jara Chanda. A Purvanga Pradhana Raga with the phrases of Pari and Dani. You don't need to sing any of the other notes. The moment you sing Pari, the raga is revealed. So also if you sing da ni re re ga ma re, even the small ga, the sadharana gandhara need not be revealed. Ga ma ga re 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 sa, that is enough to indicate Jaivanti. It is this philosophy that Muttuswami Dikshitar has adapted into his Dujavanti. The 3 or 4 ways in which the Sadharana Gandhara, the predominant Gandhara is the Antara Gandhara. But the Sadharana Gandhara, the way it's very delicate usage. The other aspect which is fascinating in the case of Dujavanti is the adaptation takes the help of 2 very powerful ragas. One is that of Sahana and one is that of Yadukula Kamboji. In fact, if you take the first line of Chetashree Balakrishna, it is fully Sahana. Chetashree Balakrishnam. Till there. Jare re Chintitartha Pradacharanara Vindam Mukundam That is whole and whole Yadukula composition. Sari ma ma ga ma pa da sa sa ni da pa ma ga ri ga sa. He makes it seem as if it is Dujavanti. The beautiful Sadharana Gandhara, which actually doesn't come in that line. But just the hope is enough to register it as Dujavanti. That's the way I think of it. Because when I learned this Kriti, I didn't think of it as Yadukula Kamboja. Later on, when you analyze it, and when what is also written in the SSP, that this raga is sung with the phrases, with murchanas of Sahana and Yadukala Kamboja is written. So then you come to know. But it's always the impending beauty of the Sadharana Gandhara that keeps you wanting to listen. Cheta, Anuswaram of the Ga. Cheta. This is how srI kAmAkshi. The Navavarnam in Sahana begins. Cheta srI Bala Krishnam. Here also it is Mari Magari. The Ga comes only in the end. Bhajare Re. Here the Dujavanti phrase comes. Pasa Pari comes. Re Che Pari. Very indicative of Dujavanti. So how, with the help of Sahana and Yadukula Kamboji, he implants a new aesthetic into the Carnatic mindset. It's like, it is not entirely new, but it is new. The familiar elements of Sahana and Yadukula Kamboji makes the listener intimate with the raga immediately, because he's already intimate with those aspects. In fact, in the Anupallavi and Charana, Dikshitar gathers more courage. Nutana nIrajAkshi Sriram Nanda Kishoram Pitavasana Dharam Kambugandaram Giridaram. Not a single Sadharana Gandhara. Because he feels he has established that small Sadharana Gandhara so well in your mind that you will imagine it. Nutanadi Samharam Purushottamavataram Chitala Hridaya Viharam Sri Rukmini Daram. No tinge of the Sadharana Gandhara, but still you can hear it. That is the magic of Dikshitar. Of course, in the next one, in the next Madhyama Kala after the Charanam, he relieves the listener. Pona por deduthin po, the Sadharana Gandhara. That's also in a very, very subtle way. Navatulasi vanamalam Naradadi Munijalam Kuvalayadi Paripalam Guru Guganuta Gopalam. The aesthetic of Yadukala Kamboji is Dujavantized in this composition. So that is also a very, very intelligent way of adapting a Hindustani aesthetic, a Hindustani, raga with two gas, two nishadas. But he decides not to do anything with the Kakali nishada, right? He doesn't want to deal with two beasts. One vivadi is good enough for him to deal with. He avoids that. So it is always only Kaisiki nishada that comes in the Kriti. The raga Hamviru is an adaptation of two ragas from the Hindustani tradition, more so Kedar and a little bit of Hamir. But the name has come derived from the lesser portion as I see it in the composition of Dikshitar. There is Hamir, there is Kedar, but there is more of Kedar and very little of Hamir in the composition. These two ragas, Hamir and Kedar, are very closely resembling ragas in the Hindustani tradition. Both of them have both the madhyamas. That is the speciality of these two ragas. But the way they manifest is different. I shall just sing a snatch of it and you can get a sense of it. Again, both the ragas are madhyanga pradhan. Almost all the essential activity of the raga happens in the middle of the octave. Hamir goes like this. Chameli phool chamba, chameli phool chamba, rega da nida pavagamari gamani nida nizada pavagamari pagamari sagamari damani nida dama pagamari. This is how the two madhyamas. The predominant madhyama in Hamir is the Chinna madhyama. How does Kedar go? Jede na di na na jana jede na di. The treatment of the two madhyamas is different. Kanhare nanda nandana paramani ranjana he dukha bhajana kanhare nanda nandana kana. So if you take the Muttuswami Dikshitar Kriti Purahara Nandana, there are two compositions. Purahara Nandana is lesser known. Parimala Ranganatham is a problematic case because the Kriti is very different. In fact, the whole Anupallavi Samashti Charana section is absolutely disconnected in the oral tradition and the written tradition. Whereas Purahara Nandana is more consistent with a very beautiful description of the raga, Hamviru. Purahara Nandana Ripukula Bhanjana Shikindra Vahana Mahendra Palana Purahara Nandana. This is fully echoing that of the Kedar. Kanare Nandanandana Paramani Ranjana. If you see the phrases kind of overlap in terms of the region of how the interplay of the two madhyamas. Karunamritarasa Sagara Tarunamrita Kara Shekara Suravairi Kala Puravairi Bala Guru Guga Sarasija Karaskandalila Pamapaga Marisa Mari Pamadabasa. That Pamapaga Mari, that is Hamir. Pamapaga Marisa Mari Pamadabasa Nisa Disa Disa Ni Sada Pamadaba Damarisa Nisa Daba Damarisa Da Nisa Di Ganisa Sanida Pama Pamarisa Purara. So that gamada, that plain da, is also indicative of Hamir, but for the rest of it, it is Kedar. So we don't know how Kedar was sung, how Hamir was sung 250 years back. We have no way of knowing. But that the two ragas are very close to each other is a given. And it is possible that Muttuswami Dikshitar decided to make a beautiful amalgam of the two and present it to us as one, which is what Hamviru, the raga in Carnatic, has come to be. A combination of Kedar mostly and some phrases from Hamir. The raga Brindavani, which is also known as Brindavana Saranga, is again an adaptation, not necessarily by Muttuswami Dikshitar, though there are compositions existing before the time of Muttuswami Dikshitar, and even they find a mention in the Sangeet Sampradaya Pradarshani with notation, Geetams, Prabandhas, etc. But it is the Kriti of Muttuswami Dikshitar that has kind of given the raga a full-blown presence. So in that context, Brindavana Saranga, or Brindavani as it is called in the book Sangeet Sampradaya Pradarshani, the raga Brindavani Sarang exists in Hindustani. And it is a beautiful version belonging to the family of sarangs. The sarang itself is characterized by one cell, which is Mari Sa. There's an essential amsa of every sarang. You have many types of sarang. You have Shuddha sarang, you have Adambari sarang, you have Gaud sarang, you have Brindavani sarang. So they are all a family of ragas which share this one particular trait of Mari Pari Re Pari Ni Sari. That Pa Mari is an essential feature. Brindavani sarang, its speciality is the use of two nishadas. Ni Sari Ma Ni Sari Samari Ma Pa Ni Pa Ma Pa Ni Ni Sare Sa Ni Pa Pa Va Ri Ma Ni Sari. जाऊं मैं तोहे बलिहारी, जाऊं मैं तोहे बलिहारी, तूने मेरो मन हर लीनो, जाऊं मैं तोहे बलिहारी. गरीब की इच्छा पूरन कर दो, गरीब की इच्छा पूरन कर दो, तुम तो गरीब नवाज, जाऊं मैं तोहे बलिहारी. So you see the very beautiful soundscape of the two nishadas. Ma pa ni sa ni pa, pa va ma ri ma ni sa ri. We'll take a big jump from the period of Dikshitar to today's. We find that this is the Brindavana Saranga that you find, Bharatiyar songs tuned in, and say Tilan of Balamurali Krishna Sir and all that. We find that the preferred version of Brindavana Saranga is the one with two nishadas. Even the version that I've learnt of Tyagaraja's Kamalapta Kula Kalashabdi Chandra uses both the nishadas very unabashedly. But definitely Dikshitar, like I've mentioned a couple of times through this episode, he straddled with the idea of Vivaditva. So in his version, we don't find two nishadas. Again, he goes back to the adaptative mode of plain notes, the swaras. Because there are already two ragas with the Kaisiki Nishada, which are in the gamut of this new raga, right? One is shRI, one is Madhyamavati, except for the gamakas. And of course, there is also Manirangu. So these three ragas are already within the scope of these notes. So how does Dikshitar make Brindavani also exist in the same space? That's again a puzzle, because the composition Rangapura Vihara is not found in the SSP, whereas Saundararajam Ashriye is found in SSP. And the version which is there in the SSP, he also mentions that sometimes it is sung like Raga Shri with the Sadharana Gandhara, especially in the beginning. In fact, the beginning itself is that way. And even in the version that I have heard of Srimati D.K. Patamal, it is very clearly Saundara Rajam Ashraye. You know, Ri Gari Sa. Of course, the Sa Ni Sa Ni Sa Pa Ni Pa, the plainness of the notes makes it slightly different from Madhyamavati. Saundara Rajam Ashraye Gaja Brindavana Saranga Varada Rajam Saundara Rajam Ashraye. That is the movement of the composition, and that is the prevalent composition in today's times. I think most of the musicians sing this version, where there is only one ni. How does Brindavana Saranga establish its uniqueness is a big question mark. This is my own thinking. I have heard Voleti Venkateshwarlu sing, and I find that he finds a Shruti value between the two nishadas. Ranga Pura Vihara. You know that ni is neither Kakali Nishada nor Kaisiki. And this particular value is very beautiful when I heard it. So that is one way of reconciling. Otherwise, this raga has no reason to exist. In my logical thinking, of course, we continue to sing it because there are certain schools that sing it. But in the way, so definitely, I would think that Dikshitar would have either used both nishadas and one nishada got lost, or in the attempt to sanctify things, we sometimes make a lot of scales shuddha, not having the variations. I don't find a reason why the Brindavana Saranga or Brindavani, as it is in this form, with one nishada, which is the Kaisiki nishada, what separates it from Madinangu or srI? It's a very big question mark. But yes, there is a raga called Brindavani Sarang in Hindustani, and the adaptation of Brindavani Sarang by Tyagaraja seems to be different from as it is given in the Sankita Sampradaya Pradarshani. Generally speaking, the Carnatic idiom, the most important ornament or embellishment or gamaka is the kampita. You have hundreds of types of kampita, but they all are predominantly kampita. Whether you take a Todi or a Saveri or a Devagandhari or any raga, it is a kampita gamaka that rules. It sets the tone for the Carnatic aesthetic. In comparison, it is a Shuddha Swara, the plain note and the meaned, the jaru, that is the predominant aesthetic of the Hindustani. So we have in a raga like Yamuna, we call it Yamuna Kalyani, but actually Dikshitar's name in the Sankita Sampradaya Pradarshani is given as just Yamuna. Kalyani because it has probably got added later. So even in that, you see that Kalyani is such a glorious raga already in Carnatic, right? So how do you create a separate identity and space for this beautiful raga called Yaman Kalyan? Yaman Kalyan comes into Carnatic as Yamuna. He gives it that very bare bones treatment, and the Shuddha Madhyama, that is the smaller value of the Madhyama, happens only as an Anuswara. He cannot present it because of the concept of Vivaditva not being a desirable resonance. What is Vivadi in terms of the theory? Just the superficial meaning. Two varieties of the same swara are said to be dissonant. So the Vivadi means dissonance. So when you have two Madhyamas, two Gandharas, two Nishadas, in Dikshitar's tradition of aesthetics, that is a no. You are not supposed to indulge in that. Dikshitar doesn't seem to believe in that because he revels in that. But then again, he cannot go against the theoretical discourse surrounding Vivadi. Right? Because that is also part of his legacy. So he is caught in between. So how he manages it is one of the very, very beautiful, intelligent ways of his adaptation. So in Jambupate, if you notice, the Kalyani, which is full glory in terms of the gamaka sariri gani davama padani ni padapa daga mari gada gari gamari sa. So the lakshana and lakshya of the raga is because of this kampita. Gamaka gasa ri ga ma da ni. All of them have kampita. In Yamuna, Dikshitar removes the kampita. So you see how the meaned and the plain swara, even though the notes are the same as Kalyani, except for that one place, which is the Gamari, that Jambu pa te mam te. That is the extent of that Madhyama, that small ma. Just as a small decorative, that's all. Otherwise, the ethos of the raga changes. Throughout the composition, you will hear the glory, the absolute plain note rendered, and the dehi. All those glides, those means rule. The kampita is out, the mean is in. Kind of a equation that he establishes for the identity of Yamuna. Even in ragas like Kamas, etc., we will see how Muttuswami Dikshitar manages to include the Vivaditvam, but in a very, very subtle and disguised way. Jambu pa te mam pagi nijananda amrita bodham dehi. Muttuswami Dikshitar, if indeed he sang these compositions at this Vilamba Kala or even slower, he must have had the breadth of a Drupad musician. Even Drupad, this calls for long breaths. It is the speciality of their vocal style. So the long words, they're all compound words. Amrita Bodham Dehi or Maam Pahi. You see the way they are. Ideally, that whole line should be sung in one breath for it to be as beautiful as I imagine Muttuswami Dikshitar would have sung. So even in terms of the length of the breaths, how long the melody can be held, it's an aesthetic which is predominantly the way we observe it today. There is no way we can observe or comment about how Drupad was sung a long time back. But going by how it is sung today in terms of its stylistic aspects, in terms of the use of voice, etc., we find that there are certain similarities in the way, Muttuswami Dikshitar's compositional thought reflects that, the use of the voice there. So these beautiful ways in which Hindustani music, Drupad singing, influences Dikshitar in his attempt to expand his raga scape of bringing newer elements in the building up of this aspect of raga, which is so foundational in Carnatic music and Hindustani music. Muttuswami Dikshitar, thanks to his being in North India and being under the influence of Hindustani music also, it has shaped his kritis and compositions.
Jambupate ma pakhi nijananda amrita bodham dehi Jambupate ma pakhi nijananda amrita bodham dehi Jambupate ma Ambujasanadi Sagala Deva Namana Ambujasanadi Sagala Deva Namana Tumburunuta Hridayata Popa Shamana Tumburunuta Hridayata Popa Shamana Ambudhi Ganga Kaveri Yamuna Ambudhi Ganga Kaveri Yamuna Kambu Kandya Khilandeshwari Ramana Kambu Kandya Khilandeshwari Ramana Jambupate ma Parvataja Prathita विभो पञ्चभूतमय प्रपञ्च प्रभो पर्वतज प्रथिता लिङ्ग विभो पञ्चभूतमय प्रपञ्च प्रभो सर्वजीव दयाकर शम्भो समजटवी निलय स्वयं भो सर्वजीव दयाकर शम्भो समजटवी निलय स्वयं भो सर्वकरुणा सुदसिन्धो शरणागत वत्सलार्थ बन्धो सर्वकरुणा सुदसिन्धो शरणागत वत्सलार्थ बन्धो अनिर्वचनीय नाद बिन्दो अनिर्वचनीय नाद बिन्दो नित्य मौळि विधृत गङ्गेन्दो अनिर्वचनीय नाद बिन्दो नित्य मौळि विधृत गङ्गेन्दो निर्विकल्पक समाधि निष्ठ शिवकल्पकतरो निर्विकल्पक समाधि निष्ठ शिवकल्पकतरो निर्विशेष चैतन्य निरञ्जन गुरु गुह गुरो निर्विकल्पक समाधि निष्ठ शिवकल्पकतरो निर्विशेष चैतन्य निरञ्जन गुरु गुह गुरो जम् ma pa gi nijanda amrita bodham dehi jambupate ma pa gi